Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are The Modern Perspective, and today we have a new podcast for you titled My Crime, Living While Poor. Here we have with us myself, Maria Almatawa, and
Ashley Anders,
Sophia Rodriguez,
Katie Lashley.
Today we are going to be discussing two different events where biopolitics has affected the people in Bhopal and Flint, Michigan, and how the victims of these incidents were helplessly wronged merely for being poor. While the government makes sure that all the rich and wealthy are in safe hands, they show little regard towards the safety and health of the poor. So, for starters, what is biopolitics? According to anthropobiopolitics.wordpress.com, biopolitics is when human life processes are managed under regimes of authority over knowledge, power, and the processes of subjectification. So, Ashley, how about we move the mic over to you so you can tell us all about the Bhopal incident.
Right. So the Bhopal disaster happened December 2nd, 1984. The event was caused by Union Carbide India Limited, which is a gas plant company, in which an estimated 3,928 deaths were certified after a very lethal gas leak attacked the community, where there was free healthcare that was offered, and it was supposed to be there until 2006. However, their efforts were often met with strikes due to the quality of the healthcare being disputed. The problem in which biopolitics takes place is that even today, the issue hasn't been solved. The grounds are still contaminated. The building in which the gas leak happened is still standing. There is little justification given. There is little resources given. People are still fighting to have even the basic necessities of clean water, in which, of course, again, biopolitics come in play, where they made this huge plant. They knew that there was something wrong with the building of the plant, and yet instead of taking the time to handle a small issue, it turned into an even bigger one with thousands of human casualties in the process, with the saying, make, live, and let die. So the Bhopal disaster is definitely one in which people can reflect back on, and understanding that this is completely unavoidable, and this was completely unavoidable disaster in which was allowed to have happened, and the casualties have yet to be acknowledged and receive proper recognition and proper help even today.
Okay, so what arguments do you think the authorities would make in response to what you just said?
Well, a lot of people definitely feel as though they have given as much as they can. There were some settlements given to the families. However, because the grounds are still contaminated, because people are still fighting for basic necessities in which they can receive adequate water, adequate medical care, there's definitely more that needs to be done. So I would say that a lot of the authorities would argue that they paid their dues, and that they feel as though their treatment of the issue was just, lawful, and reasonable.
I feel like it's I don't know. It's sort of like, even though they give settlements and money and shit to the family, I feel like it doesn't come close to the actual cost of all those medical bills and things, and how it affects you, or could affect you or your family, for the rest of your life. Even in Animals People, how he was forced to, walk on all fours like an animal. I feel like it's one of those things where it's hard to put a price on that, and if they were to do it justifiably, their entire company would have been bankrupt, to be honest. So
yeah, definitely. In Sanaa's novel, it was clear that the people felt dehumanized. The basic necessities in which they needed weren't being provided, not because they did anything other than be in a low-income community without the proper bank account to fight for their rights. And I
Mhm.
think if we're going to be 100% sure, there's no way in which a rich or a higher income community would even have a gas plant built near their housing. It just wouldn't happen. But the fact is, they again allowed for these things to happen. They allowed for the conditions in which they put these people, to put them in danger already with being exposed to radiation, and then on top of that, with the gas leak and killing of thousands of people, they felt no need to really compensate for the lives that were lost. The money that they gave was simple chump change, and I mean, even now, for there to still be a building standing reminding people of the lives that were lost, of the poison that has damaged people permanently.
And still is affecting people there today.
Exactly.
I noticed in one of your statements how you said that only in a more poor, low income area would
Right.
would a a factory like that even be allowed to be built.
Mhm.
It's sort of a reoccurring theme that I've noticed in a lot of different disasters.
Right.
Flint, Michigan, and the water crisis that's happening there. In my research, I found something really similar, actually. How it's it seems like whichever population is least valued is sort of where companies are willing to pollute,
Right.
if that makes sense.
That's true. I mean, if you're a part of the government, you're considered to be rich and wealthy, and so that means that you would have to care for your own safety and well-being.
Definitely.
But if it's someone you don't know, you don't have connections to, and there are definitely people who are, lower income, lower class, quote unquote, to say the least, why would you care for someone like that? Someone you don't even see on TV, someone
Right.
you don't personally know, you have absolutely no connections with, and they're not even a part of your workplace or your neighborhood or so forth.
Definitely. I think that, in that case, it's that argument that money equals a voice. And I think it's especially important to understand that a lot of people who are from low-income communities, who are just flat out poor, living in the street, a lot of times these people don't know about the voice in which they can hold, or don't even have the proper amount of money to even have their voice or their opinion even be seen as important. It's definitely an issue in which we see today common. I mean, there's even factories in LA that exist now in low-income communities that are constantly giving off very dangerous fumes and radiation that no one even really speaks on.
Yeah, and the worst part is people get used to it.
Exactly.
Because they think that, being in their position, it's sort of like, the victimization of being poor.
Right.
In a way. It's like, okay, so you're poor, so then there are certain rights that you don't deserve. That's sort of the way people who aren't in that position kind of look at it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time, that's part of the reason why they consider people who live in these places, which are heavily polluted, are expendable, because,
Right.
they're poor, like, what can they do? Sort of mentality. And then the people who live there just kind of accept it. Me growing up in LA, I know it's smoggy, but we're like, we breathe it every day. I'm like, what am I gonna do about it? I don't
Right.
But it's not okay that people grow up there and people live that way for most, if not all, of their lives, and we just kind of see it as normal.
Right.
Thank you, Ashley. And now, back to Katie. So Katie, would you like to give us a little more insight on the Flint water crisis in Michigan?
So essentially the whole issue is caused by the changing of the water source in the city of Flint. The state appointed emergency management basically wanted to cut costs in the city by changing the water supply. They basically changed it from They changed the water. The water used to come from Detroit, and then it came from Huron instead. But the thing about Huron was that the pipes were really, really old and filled with lead, And so they just kind of used that instead of replacing it with the proper equipment so that the water could be clean. And once again, all for the sake of a lower price range. So they valued saving the city money, saving themselves money, rather than protecting the lives of the people and making sure that their water was actually drinkable, which they also broke the law, the Safe Drinking Water Act. They violated that. And people, you know, as we all know, people had health repercussions. There were higher lead levels in their blood. A lot of children specifically were affected by this, as well as different weird skin reactions and shit. But yeah, so basically what they were giving as a solution was they distributed water bottles essentially for a while. They were supposed to replace the pipes in 2016. It's 2018 now. And a recent development is that they've stopped distributing water bottles. So it's kind of like, what are people supposed to do? It's everyone's sort of pointing the finger at another person or another department based on who's to blame, and no one's actually fixing the issue that they really should have fixed before they switched the water sources in the first place.
No, I think, it just calls on the bullshit of it all. If we're going to be perfectly honest, it's the fact that these people need adequate water, and by cutting corners, and I love how you made that distinction, because at first you were like, to save the city, but it's not saving the city, it's saving the people who benefit from having...
It's saving people's bank accounts.
Exactly.
Essentially.
So I think, it's all just bullshit. It's covering up the fact that they don't care about certain people, and it's very clear with the care and the dedication that they show. If someone wanted to make sure that people were having healthy, clean water, they would have it by now. We're just going to be honest. But the fact that politicians are drinking lavish, purified water while other people are contemplating poisoning their children because they're thirsty, it's a huge problem. Like, at the very least, continue distributing the water bottles. Like, it's appalling that people are so willing to let people die in order to save their bank accounts.
Especially if you look at the demographic of
Right.
Flint. And, well, shout out to the last episode, but with Katrina in New Orleans, too.
Right.
It's like, who is the population? They were poor. They were mostly African American. Who historically does this country not like and not care about generally? Poor people, African American people, and people of color in general.
Yes.
So it's like we're following the same ass pattern, but in modern day, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And in that sense, as appalled as we can be, it's also not even that surprising.
It's really not.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I read up on it and realized that they were supposed to replace the pipes in like 2016, I was like, yeah, of course they haven't. Honestly, not in Flint, of course, not.
Right.
But if it was like freaking, I don't know, Beverly
Hollywood.
Hills,
Yeah,
exactly,
exactly.
North Hollywood, that would have been fixed.
There
like
would
the
be
next
no
day.
problem.
Exactly.
Exactly.
One, there wouldn't have been a problem in the first place, and if there had, it would have been solved in like 2 minutes, probably.
Exactly.
Whereas it's over 2 years later, and we're still here, except it's worse now. People are having to get their own water bottles and supplied in other ways.
Yeah, like 3 years after this happened, there was only in a lawsuit a judge approved $87 million in aid to replace unsafe water lines by the date of 2020. So it's like, why not give the help before and have things fixed before?
Right.
Why wait until more lives are like endangered?
Yeah, for sure. And we also see scientists in and professionals replying to that. So we have Dr. Mona Hanna Atisha, who says that this is wrong. She specifically tweeted this. This is wrong. Until all lead pipes are replaced, states should make available bottled water and filters to Flint residents. Hashtag Flint water crisis. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the people who are living there. It's also people around the area who are noticing this this unjust act, and realizing that a change has to be made. Now moving on to Sophia. So Sophia, can you tell us about the public versus the authorities' reactions, the effects on the victims, the environment, and to this day, just going over basically over what we kind of hinted on before. Is the issue solved? Is it not solved?
Talking about the victims, which like Katie mentioned, they're basically poor people of color, and they develop different illnesses and diseases. There was different bacteria found in the water that there was one disease that killed 12 people, and it was caused by bacteria that grows in the water, and it is professionals usually said that it's rare that in the Flint area, it's usually 12 people per year get this disease, but with the water crisis, it jumped up to 45 per year, and it was caused because of the high lead in the water, dropped the chlorine, which is what causes bacteria to die. So basically, allowing the water to rise its lead levels cause the disease to become more populated. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also a lot of people who have been like metal poisoned, and they have developed anemia, memory loss, fatigue, digestive diseases, and a lot of things. And it's like they talk about lending money to fix the pipes, fix if like the water levels, the water lead levels, but there's little to be said about helping the people who already got sick about it. So it's like the state is more worried about going back to a good state of lead than fixing the problems it created. The president during the disaster declared the disaster 2 years after. It was after people started complaining of the dirty water, the bad smell, and he didn't even declare it a disaster. He declared it a state of emergency. Like I already said, there were a lot of lawsuits made, and just one in 2017, the approved money to replace 18,000 unsafe water lines by 2020, when they had already said some of them would be replaced by 2016.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. It's very tragic, honestly, what has happened to these people, and knowing that it takes a lot of time for all of this to actually be processed, and knowing that it takes more than just even one complaint about the quality of the water for the state to actually declare it, an emergency. For the victims, to wrap things up, you are not alone. You have a lot of people rooting for you, even if it's not, the higher up, authorities or the government. You have people who are here for your emotional support, and we will try to provide you with more help. everyone else, what can we do to solve the problem?
I feel like the biggest issue with a lot of the disasters that exist today is the fact that there is no recognition. A lot of times people don't even realize half of what comes with a disaster until it's already happened. And Katrina, it was the implementation of charter schools, of hotels and casinos, gentrification happening daily, happening right before their eyes as they were trying to recover from this incredible disaster with the breaking of the levees. I think it was understanding that the hurricane wasn't even just caused by a hurricane, it was caused by the breaking of the levees, creating these structures that they allowed to be inadequate and unsafe, and therefore allowing the deaths that happened as a result of their negligence. And I think it's so important to understand what biopolitics is and how it plays a part in everyday life, how it's so easy to gentrify things that once were affordable, to create environments in which the poor are seen as enemies more so than citizens. And I think it's so important to understand that even when you experience privilege yourself, to put yourself in someone else's shoes, understand what it means to be poor, to understand what it means to be seen as a criminal simply for not having the same bank account as yourself. And I think that once we make that distinction, once we allow ourselves to be put into those situations, there won't be gas plants near communities, there won't be thousands of casualties, there won't be basic necessities stripped away from people like water and clean air. It's time for us to stop seeing ourselves through rank and start seeing ourselves through humans. The whole problem is everyone is becoming dehumanized because of the lack of attention, the lack of consideration, and the lack of support for these people. And I think it is clearly time that we start to become aware and we start to take action for the people who can't do it themselves.
Yes. Yeah, like how you've been mentioning, basically the people who suffer more these types of disasters are poor people who generally think they can't have a word or they can't have a voice because who will listen to them? Like, they don't think they have the right to say anything. So I do feel like you were saying one of the solutions could be to do speak up, and like people who really want to help don't just like donate or something to try to do something, not just be like, oh, I will donate and hopefully I'll help someone who needs it. Like, actually do something, and that you know for sure is gonna help.
Exactly. Like, your reliefs to aid efforts shouldn't be buying an iPhone. It should be, going out volunteering or helping with the research, getting educated on what AIDS is. There are certain things that we can take action on instead of taking the easy way out.
And I mean, there's a lot of people who think, oh, I should help, but then they're like, someone's already helping. Like, you don't really know if someone is helping, so extra help wouldn't kill anyone. So there's never gonna be enough help when poor people are trying to have their voice heard, and they just can't. So I feel like one of the solutions, it would be helping those people who have a low voice raise their voice so it could actually be heard by those in charge.
Yeah, so we have to speak up for the people who cannot be heard, and we have to be the movement, support them with more than just materialistic objects that will not last, and more importantly, take on our responsibility as humans to respect and support other humans that are in need.
And lastly, I think it's to bring up the idea of objection. I think it's really easy to create those barriers. I think it's something that we're taught. You know, we have labels and assigned roles in which we're expected to follow and carry out. But if I've known anything from being a college student, first generation college student, it's that we have the right to write our own stories. And I think in understanding that, we also have the right to see through the lens, to understand our own privileges, and to act accordingly. And so in that case, I definitely urge people to acknowledge the privilege that they have, acknowledge the rights in which you have that other people's don't, and make a change about it. It's so easy to be content with the labels in which you are given, especially if you don't have any drawbacks from it or any consequences from it. And I think if you do know that you experience those privileges, it is your obligation, absolutely your obligation, to equal the playing field, to make sure that you're not the only one succeeding, because at the end of the day, this is all of our planets, this is all of our Earth, and it's our job to protect it. It's our job to protect each other, because once everyone's gone, that's it. So I think the best part is understanding that we are all human, and trying to dehumanize some over others will never end in success for anyone.
Or not even in a humanistic society.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, and we hope you join us next time.
Thanks.